All right, guys. So we just watched the Boston Pro prejudge, and it came down to, I think, 4 guys.
Yep.
James, can I get your thoughts really quick on what you thought of the bodybuilding overall and the show overall?
Overall, I feel like I was a little bit not disappointed, but some people didn't come in as expected. There's a few people that were kind of a few names before the show that weren't quite where they need to be. But the top 4, from our understanding, is pretty much as expected. We kind of called it out even before the show started. My opinion right now would be that we're still going to have a Bonac win. Justin's looking very good, very improved from last week, more like himself. He looks like he's probably in for a solid second. And then Steve Kuko's looking really good, dry, not quite as full as we'd like to see him, but I think that his condition is going to carry him well into the show. He could come back a bit fuller later. And Samson is humongous, in good shape. A little bit off with the glaze. Presentation's really good, though. So I think he's going to end up in 4th. Below that, I'm really not sure. It was really surprising that, in my opinion, Regan wasn't going to be in that 5th place because he looks a little off. And that was a fight between Max Charles and a couple of other names. Yeah, Phil, and who else was in there with Phil? I think that was it, literally just those 2. So that's going to be your top 6 kind of there. And then rest of them, it could be anything, to be fair. But all in all, good show. Lighting's not the greatest, so when you watch the live stream, you just got to keep a real close eye and have a look. But yeah, I think the placings are going to remain the same unless Samson could dramatically improve those little details like the gloss and stuff. And if Justin does like at the Arnold, perhaps comes in a little bit worse, but who knows? I think it's a pretty unanimous top 4.
I just realized I should have asked you one question at a time because you just wrapped up the whole thing.
The whole sum up. That's perfect.
Yeah, so now we don't have anything to say.
But that's my opinion. That's
it's
my
not
opinion.
It's not wrong. I should have probably broken it down.
That was perfect.
Into more specific questions.
Sorry,
No, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. Ian,
but do you agree? So you 2 agree?
Well, I'll let Ian go ahead.
I definitely agree with everything James said there. I would have liked to see a little bit better version of Regan and Phil. Those were the guys that I think could have, if they were in a little bit better, I don't want to say condition, but just had peaked a little better. I think those are guys that could have fought for those top 4, top 5 spots. But it looks like they might be giving those up to Max, or, if Phil is making, he's just in that 5th, 6th position. But Bonac looked great, just as good as last week. Justin looked great, about the same as he did on Friday night. So if he holds that together, I see him sticking in a good 2nd position. Kuklo, just like James said, great conditioning, but with that conditioning with Steve comes a little lack of pop. And I'd like to see kind of a happy medium for him, because I think, especially in the back shots, he loses some ground, especially when you're staying next to Justin and Bonac, who have really good, really popping, detailed backs. I think to come back with a touch fuller, like you said, Fouad, I think there is a little room for him to be fuller without compromising that conditioning at all.
Yeah.
And Samson looked excellent. I mean, his flow is great. And like James said, I think the thing that's just hurting the most is, 1, a combination of dark lighting, and 2, his glaze is a little on the lighter side. If anything, non-existent, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think that's hurting him a little bit. I don't know. I would have liked to see him and Steve get compared more, because they didn't really stand next to each other. They had Justin and Bonac next to each other,
Agreed.
and then them at the bookend. So I would have liked to see a comparison of just those 2, because I think it's pretty obvious they're in 3rd and 4th, and I think to get them compared would be a nice thing for not only for the athletes but for the fans as well, right?
Definitely.
All right. So a few specific questions for people that didn't watch the live stream that are just watching this little piece. What did Phil Klahar miss out on this time versus last year? Because I know a lot of people, even us in the podcast, when we did the predictions, kind of had Phil in that top 5.
Yep.
So what did Phil miss out on, in your guys' opinion, this time around versus last year?
You want me to go?
Yeah, anybody, whoever wants to go.
I think the thing that really brought him from being a guy that wasn't really a top contender to being a top contender last year was being able to get his midsection under control, because he has oodles of muscle. I mean, his back is insane. He's really good in the side shots. His quads are good. He still needs some work on the adductors and the hamstrings, a little more width and thickness there to match his really big, thick back. But I think what's hurting the most here is, a little bit of, it's not even so much distension as almost like a little bit of messiness through the midsection.
The structure of it.
Yeah. It's not under super great control. And it's just the structure is not super appealing.
Yeah.
So a guy like that, it has to be really, really, really in control and really dialed in to be optimal. And then I think his conditioning through his glutes and hamstrings wasn't quite as good as it was last year. Obviously, this light is not doing anyone favors, but you can still see the conditioning. I don't think is the best he's ever brought compared to like Texas or Tampa last year. So I'd like to see him get back up on stage again this year and bring that conditioning a little bit tighter. And I think he'll be there fighting for top spots again for sure.
James, when you see someone like Max have like a pretty good year last year, or he's in contention quite a bit, and this year seems to have faded a bit. What is Max doing wrong, or what is it? Is it because Max is older now, or is it change of coach, or what do you think it is that he's missing out on, and why is he placing higher?
See, the first thought you'd think is an age thing, but then you can see like Bonac from last year's Olympia to now shows that you can resolve a lot of issues with changes. I don't know whether it's just as simple as coming down on the diet too fast, not doing it slow enough, or making just some small adjustments throughout the diet process that were maybe too much at the time, so that the change in the physique is happening at a speed that is almost a little bit too fast to land the plane softly. Because I feel like Max has just perhaps lost a bit of muscle on the way down. He's obviously in really good shape, but could he have got there with more muscle if he had done the process a little bit more? I'm not saying patient, because he's a patient man, but there are ways to get there and land with more muscle. So I think it's just a dietary thing. I think it's more just you've got a certain amount of muscle at the beginning of prep, and ideally the perfect world is you want to end with as much muscle as possible. And sometimes something you do in the process will dictate how much of that you keep and how much you lose. There's always going to be a little bit of loss. And I think Max has just gone on the side of losing a little bit too much to really highlight how good his physique is.
Ian, Regan is always the guy that people are waiting for. Regan's almost got like a Cedric complex going on, where people are like, he could be the greatest if he was just this. Yeah. If that. So what is the problem?
It's tough because he did show glimmers of hope at the end of last year. I mean, he had a couple really great showings to finish off last year. His Olympia wasn't stellar. He was at the bottom of the pack for the Olympia, and then finished that season off strong when he paired up with Milos. It had some, what did he do last year? Romania or some of those European shows.
Yeah.
A couple shows where he actually, in Egypt, where he had some actually quite good showings. He wasn't standing in the lineups he's standing in today, or the lineup from the Arnold. So it's obviously hard to compare. People look different in different lineups. But yeah, I think it's, that formula, they haven't quite nailed down 100%, but it obviously is doable because he has been in, better shape, better condition, and displayed that like he did at the end of last year. But it still seems they're shooting in the dark a little bit here with what the formula is. I think they got it. They might have tried to replicate it, but the result wasn't the same. So I think they need to keep, exploring options and just keep working away. And I think eventually he'll find, what that mix is to come in, with optimal fullness and optimal conditioning. But I think he's, it's just time, man. He's still a young guy. I think, he is still getting better muscularity, but I think that to really, really be cracking that, he's just got to be consistent with that conditioning, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we have Samson, who I feel like is this a win for Samson, or is Samson disappointed? Because I know last week at the Arnold, placing fourth, it was a huge win for him, right? Like because Samson for a long time is in that second call out. And then last year he finally won a show, and now he's being looked at. He's really being looked at by a lot of people. I think the Arnold last week really kind of catapulted him into like the public view.
Yeah.
So is this now, because of he's being looked at in the top spots, is this still a victory for Samson, or is he now expecting more? Like, is he going to walk away from today being okay with third or fourth?
I personally don't know how content he'll be with it, but I still think from a career standpoint and a judging standpoint, he's still getting in that mix. He's still getting compared with these top guys. And I think this will continue to be a trend for him. If he continues to show up the same, continue to improve. I think it's just a matter of time before he's, you have to look at this lineup too. I mean, you have Steve Kuklo, who's like been sixth at the Olympia. I mean, you have Justin, who's amazing. You have Bonac, who's won Arnold's. I mean, it's not like he's losing here to like scrubs,
Yeah.
I mean, this is a guy like Samson that's really just come into his own in the last 6 months, 6 months or the last year. So to be, going toe to toe, and I mean, in a lot of ways, you can make a good case for him beating a lot of these guys, in a lot of ways, do I think they're having it go that way today? Not necessarily, but I think that all the tools are there. And with the way he's going, I think it's just a matter of time before he beats these guys. And obviously after the 4th place at the Arnold, it's probably going to be a little wind out of your sails being probably 4th here again. But it's still an excellent showing, and he's definitely on the right path to doing some big things.
I don't know if he'll beat Steve today, but if he does, I think it's a victory for him. Because in my mind, like when I was competing, in my mind, I was always look at the guy who is next in line as that stepping stone, right? So I'm like, Steve beat him last week. If he can somehow leapfrog Steve this week and walk away in 3rd, it's a huge victory for him. Because beating Steve Kuklo puts you in that upper echelon of competitors.
Well, that was my stepping stone, was literally Steve Kuklo. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's what you did last week. So last year. So
I agree.
Sorry, go ahead, James.
I was just going to add one last thing. Again, it's going to come down to perspective as well as how is he looking at it? Is he looking at the people that beat him, or is he looking at how many new faces he beat? Because like tallying up how many people you've managed to beat on a pro stage is sometimes a nice lift as well. If he comes 4th here, fair enough. He might be like, what, last week I beat Justin. I'm a bit disappointed. But also there's probably 3 or 4 new faces at this show that he's able to go, what? That's more people that I've been able to defeat on the stage. I'm only getting better.
I think you also need to have a little bit of objectivity when you look at it as a competitor and say, because last week, Justin did beat him at prejudging. When Justin was on, Justin did beat him.
That's right.
Justin, I think, really more beat himself at finals more than Samson or Steve beat Justin.
Agree. Yeah.
I think him and AJ obviously, had some mistakes. Some accidents happened between prejudge and finals, and the look didn't quite come back the same. And I think if he holds it together here, he will keep that placing that he didn't get last week. So it's not so much that Samson necessarily slipped in anything. It's more that Justin's just going to hold it together this week, I think. So
I don't think that's very different.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily Samson that has anything to be upset about. He's not necessarily losing to anyone different, because he did lose to Justin at prejudging last week. It's just different, right?
Yeah, I agree. So last question, I'll let you guys go and I'll ask you both. Last week, William was placed in 2nd because of his gyno. Now, I know the way that works in my mind is those guys may have been tied, like him and Brandon may have been tied, and they're like, well, this guy has gyno, so put him in 2nd.
Yeah.
Is that same thing going to happen, or is William good enough that he's better enough than Justin that the gyno won't affect him?
I would say, from my opinion, he is ahead enough that one discrepancy won't be enough to him out of 1st place.
Yeah. I mean, he still beat all 3 of these guys last week,
Yeah. That's right.
So, I mean, even with gyno last week, he still beat all of them. So, I think he hasn't slipped any from last week. I don't think anyone has improved so much from last week that they're going to overtake him. I see it as pretty much the same slate as last week. And I expect, honestly, the outcome to be pretty much the same as it was on Friday prejudging, because Justin is about the same.
Is Justin better than last Friday's prejudge? That's what I was going to ask you.
I don't think he's better. I think he's comparable. I think he was very, very impressive, and the lighting was a little better at that show, maybe. But very comparable packages. Definitely better here than he was at the finals on Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay, so final placing, we have William, Justin, Kuklo, Samson. That's how we see it?
Yeah, and then backing out the top 5 is either Phil or Max.
Or Max, yeah. Okay. All right, guys. Thanks for prejudging. I don't know if we're going to be back for finals. If we are, we'll let you guys know in our stories. But for now, that's it. Thanks, boys.
Thank you very much.
All right. Peace. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, share with your friends, and like the video. And if you get a chance, check out the description for all the different links to all the different places you can find Hostile and myself. And lastly, check out hostile.com for our new line of supplements and all of our apparel and gear. Thanks again for watching.